Good morning. Oh boy, Chuck Norris. What an end of an era. I hope y'all can hear me. I am going to say some Chuck Norris jokes just to open. Chuck Norris doesn't read books. I could put this in the comments. He stares him down until he gets the information he wants. When God said, "Let there be light," Chuck Norris said, "Say please." In the beginning, there was nothing. Then Chuck Norris roundhouse kicked ads. Nothing, and told it to get a job. If you spell Chuck Norris in Scrabble, you win forever. Time waits for no man unless that man is Chuck Norris. What a guy. Anyway, that's kind of a bummer. Oh. Chuck Norris doesn't strike gold. Gold is the byproduct of Chuck Norris roundhouse kicking rocks. All right, I have a microphone, and I don't know if you tuned in to my sup, dude. If you tuned into my previous test run, then you saw me trying to set up. I even had a camera, a nifty new camera, webcam, and it turns out to be junk. I'm so glad that you're here too. Hooray! Hi guys. All right. I yesterday I read for an hour and 20. I was sidetracked and talked a lot. I'm going to try not to do that today so that we can get through this. But who knows? I mean, it's a book club. We're meant to talk about it. So, did I read The Pagan Connection? Or did I stop here? Let me see. The Roots of the Flower People. Who was here with me yesterday? And I have my dad's bookmark. So when my dad died, and it will be March 26th, 11 years ago, my mom, I know how she operates. She needed to pack up all his stuff. So we went home after seeing him and packed up all his stuff. And then, amazing. Amazing. I love to hear that you guys are sticking with me in this because this may work. We may do something here and continue it with other great books. I think it's so important for us to disseminate information that people don't want us to have. Anyway, what I was saying about my dad, we packed up all his stuff. I haven't seen it since. And before that, though, she loaded up a storage unit before he died of all of his stuff, like his office stuff. Turns out he kept every note I ever wrote him. So I'm like finding those. Also, I've acquired his sci-fi books collection, and he was stockpiling those as well. And he's got like signed first editions and priceless stuff. But it's almost like I get to give him another hug, you know. So precious memories. And this bookmark is so cute. It clips onto wherever part of the book. And then it's got this little dangly bit. I'm like, oh, my dad, he was such a reader. I'm not sure where we ended, but we're on this page. So I'm going to just start at the top of the page, which is The Pagan Connection. And I've moved into my kiddo's classroom. So that's why you see prime numbers and the oceans and other things. I just wanted to not be, well, everybody kind of wanted me to not be in the living room. And I wasn't liking sitting Indian style in my bed because although I am able-bodied, I don't like sitting crisscross applesauce for hours at a time. Anyway, all right. When the boogeyman comes to sleep or goes to sleep every night, he checks the closet for Chuck Norris. It is Redeeming Love. What's your name? I'm not sure I've seen you yet. Have I? I don't know. Good to meet you. Good to see you here. Thank you for being here with me. R.I.P. Chuck Norris. I thought he was running for Congress. Maybe maybe that was just one of them jokes. Time waits for no one. Chuck, what was it? Time waits for no one. If you spell Chuck Norris in Scrabble, you win forever. Time waits for no man unless that man is Chuck Norris. It is with heavy hearts that our family shares the sudden passing of our beloved Chuck Norris. Yesterday morning, while we would like to keep the circumstances private, please know that he was surrounded by family and was at peace. That's a great picture of him. Oop. Anyway, I'm hit by that because, I don't know, he was supposed to live forever. Anyway, all right. The pagan connection. And we still have quite a bit of chapter 4 to go, but I think this this lets us know that we can chat about it on the way. So, yet it was not until the Vietnam War and the anti-war movement that really created the climate of moral despair and rot that spurred America's youth to rely on drugs. In other words, the war was used as a backdrop against which, let me know if you can hear me okay as well. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you made it here. It's crazy to me why, awesome. Some of my clips, only the Erica stuff gets seen. I mean, I guess I love it. I'm glad that it is because people need to be thinking further than what's just pushed in front of them by TPUSA and all the donor-funded talking heads. Questions deserve to be asked in this situation. And if that's what pulls you into these book clubs and me reading about the protocols and stuff, then that's great because I feel like this is the most important stuff. This is the most important stuff for me to be passing along. Anyway, okay. I did read this yesterday, but I think it's okay to start here. Their disillusionment with the war made the protesters easy prey for their masters to condition them under the guidance of the Tavistock Institute and the CIA through the influence of the LSD drug culture. I'm not suggesting that most anti-war protesters were paid agents of the elite circles. On the contrary, as Crichton Zokos, and look at this name right here, Crichton Zokos suggests the overwhelming majority of anti-war protesters went into the Students for a Democratic Society organization on the basis of outrage at the developments in Vietnam. But once caught in the environment defined by the Tavistock Institute, by the Institute's psychological warfare experts, and inundated with the messages that hedonistic pleasure-seeking was a legitimate alternative to immoral war, the protesters' sense of values and their creative potential went up in a cloud of hashish smoke. The outcome of this debacle was a major strategic withdrawal from Asia by the United States, spelled out in Henry Kissinger's Guam Doctrine. Adoption of the spectacular failure known as the China card strategy for containing Soviet influence and the demoralization of the American people over the war, to the point that the sense of national pride and confidence in the future progress of the Republic was badly damaged. And look at how bad it is to be patriotic these days. And being patriotic does not mean you are stoked with the government. It means this country is full of amazing people and amazing places. But you can't be anyway. That moral despair is what the Frankfurt School had hoped for back when they were looking for new cultural forms to increase the alienation of the population. They found it in the newly created Rockefeller Tavistock sponsored and financed organization, IPS, or the Institute for Policy Studies. And that leads us to the next section, called Institute for Policy Studies. Established in 1963, IPS was run by President Kennedy's National Security Advisor and former president of Ford's Foundation, McGeorge Bundy, one of the architects of the U.S. policy towards Vietnam, particularly the notorious Strategic Hamlet programs and the murderous Operation Phoenix program in the Mekong Delta region. The IPS's main assignment was to control and coordinate a wide array of pseudo-organizations from local community control and Black nationalist groups to anti-technology organizations. Anti-war movement and terrorist operations such as the Weathermen. Ooh, that's a Clutch song. Anti-war and terrorist operations. The Weathermen. Especially under the auspices of the anti-war movement, to zero growth and environmentalist freak shows, quote, operations of the sort which were pioneered by British intelligence agencies, which place major emphasis upon the use of private institutions whose overall activity is inextricably linked to official government institutions. In short, the entirety of what became known as the 1960s, as the New Left movement, their well laid out deconstruction of Georgy Arbitov's book, The War of Ideas in Contemporary International Relations, the investigative team of EIR writes, the FBI and sections of the CIA have provided the controllers and deployment of I'm going to start that sentence over. It's kind of a train wreck at times. The FBI and sections of the CIA have provided the controllers and deployment managers of the New Left. IPS has provided the cover stories and the ideological management. Chief theoretician of the IPS was none other than Noam Chomsky. And he was just exposed as being in the Epstein files. That crushes me. That is crushing. One of the founders of the New Left. For Chomsky, the primary purpose for creating the New Left of the early 1960s was to preempt the radicalization of college youth strata to two overlapping ends. Noam Chomsky. So he was an MIT professor of linguistics, and in the protocols, they talk about linguistics being used as a weapon. Hi, Ricky. You keep your eyes on the road, friend. All right. Immediately, the purpose was to prevent the established socialist parties from effectively capturing the social ferment, which had erupted beginning in 1958. Quote, which had come to focus around the Cuban Revolution and civil rights movement up through mid-1961. At the same time, with such enterprises as the Peace Corps, the Office of Economic Opportunity, and foundation-sponsored community action projects for radicals in development at that time, to drain off student radicalism into staffing of an expanding counterinsurgency apparatus around the Rician fascist concept of local community control. In an exclusive report on the Institute for Policy Studies, the investigative team from Executive Intelligence Review points out, quote, it is important to note that these operations are the outcome of political intelligence operations set up prior to World War I under the auspices of the National Civic Federation and the Russell Sage Foundation, and which were officially institutionalized following World War II under the aegis, I hope that didn't blow out eardrums, of the CIA. The Institute for Policy Studies lists among its lecturers and fellows members of the Weathermen Group, I need to listen to that song again, a U.S. radical left organization consisting of splintered off members and leaders of the Students for a Democratic Society. In anti-war activities, IPS members carried out a series of militant actions, including bombings and violent protests, to achieve the overthrow of the U.S. government. This group was also part of the counterculture controlled from within by the US government. The Cambridge Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the Transnational Institute in Amsterdam, Holland, and related organizations such as the group of so-called ex-CIA and military intelligence personnel around counter-spy promote such policies to seed the political climate with the ideas that so many of these actually covert operations are really expressions of popular political will. How insulting, you know? And I have so many friends who are passionately driven by the social unrest. And, I tried to wake a lot of them up, and a lot of them are no longer my friends anymore. I guess Facebook official friends. Because I was trying to tell them, like, you're being manipulated. And there was nothing more embarrassing for me to have to admit that when I got done and went home and sat and stewed after the BLM protest I went to, and it was set up like a movie set. I love that you guys are connecting with each other in the comments too. It's horrifying. It's enraging. That was the one thing, the First Amendment gives us that right to speak out against our government, and they're using it against us. Funding of IPS and related institutions. So the foundations that provide the money to maintain the illegal activities of the Institute can be divided into two basic categories. First, top-level foundations, all linked to the Rockefeller family, such as the Rockefeller Family Fund, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Ford Fund, serve as organizations that disperse funds for the specific operations. What these specific operations are, we really do not know, as the official reports never identify their purpose. Instead, a cover organization or activity is used to facilitate the disbursement of funds. On the second level, foundations such as the Kaplan Fund and Stern Fund serve as conduits for political and covert functions. And Nick Shirley, did you see him? He uncovered $170 billion in fraud in California, and people are like telling him to get a job. Oh my gosh. We should be pissed. We should be pissed. People are like, next do the federal government. I'm like, with Doge, when y'all were pissed that their social security numbers were going to get exposed? And students who are studying whatever, I forget, all have access to that information anyways. The fraud is already happening anyway. So the case of Marcus Raskin. The key individual involved with IPS was Marcus Raskin, intimately linked to the top level of Rockefeller's political intelligence machine. Raskin's earlier training came at the University of Chicago Law School, a political factory for Rockefeller agents and operatives. By the mid-1960s, Rockefeller and the founders of the Institute for Policy Studies, Hans Morgenthau and Hans Morgenthau, a Rockefeller man, and one of the founding fathers of the realist school of the 20th century, and McGeorge Bundy began to establish a cover for running anarchist leftist operations via the co-opting and influencing of a vast international network of operatives for Black operations. This was done through the National Security Council, the Council's secret unit known as Special Staff. This was done through the National Security Council's secret unit known as Special Staff that plan and coordinate the psycho-political operations used to manipulate the American public. And through a vast intergovernmental undercover infrastructure that includes the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government, such as the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Treasury, and the Director of the CIA, those who control television, radio, newspaper corporations, who head the largest firms, who run the largest and most prestigious universities and think tanks, who direct the largest private foundations, who direct the largest public corporations. So just essentially our owners. Within the special staff, Raskin became one of the overseers of special covert operations and destabilization scenario planning, a unique experience in creating and developing terror. NSC, I am dyslexic. NSC special staff, on the one hand, was a part of a strategic psychopolitical operation that focuses on propaganda at small groups of people such as, excuse me, excuse me. Yeah. Grabbing moob scum. That's funny. All right. I'm going to start over before I sneezed. That's such a long sentence. NCS Special Staff, on the one hand, was part of a strategic psychopolitical operation that focused propaganda at small groups of people, such as academics or experts capable of influencing public opinion. And on the other hand, a part of tactical psychopolitical operations that focused propaganda at the masses through mass communication media. A vital part of the operation was the creation of the umbrella of the student anti-war movement. Students for a Democratic Society in the U.S., with the help of the leading U.S. figures in their social democratic Second International, such as Michael Harrington of the and UAW leaders Victor and Walter Reuther. The SDS, created by the League for Industrial Democracy, became the flagship synthetic New Left. Gosh, everything, the blueprints for how they are taking over, it all exists in the left. You know, I don't consider myself, I do know I'm a conservative, but I know that rhinos run the right, and they seem to have a hand in this as well, but the blueprints are in the left. Where was I? Victor Walter Reuther. Okay, the SDS, created by the League of Industrial Democracy, became the flagship synthetic New Left. Okay, organization for spinning off phony leftist operations internationally. In turn, the League of Industrial Democracy was financed and run by the Institute for Policy Studies. Through a process of splitting and then regrouping such organizations, a selection procedure was established for creating terrorist organizations. Raskin supervised this operation starting in 1963 and including the period when the Weathermen and other terrorist organizations were set up. As a co-director of IPS, Raskin initiated a series of projects designed for the profiling and eventual deployment of the various regroupments of SDS and left groups internationally. He supervised the Radical Reeducation Project, created in part by the University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research, the U.S.'s leading conflict resolution think tank. Raskin had also been thoroughly trained in psychological profiling through the National Training Laboratories, a project set up for the Rockefellers by the German fascist psychologist Kurt Lewin. NTL specializes in brainwashing through various methods, including transactional analysis and therapy and group therapy, as well as harder brainwashing methods, all employed to create the social basis for running terrorist operations. That made me think. I went to rehab when I was 25. I stayed in the rooms of AA for 5 years. And what I came to appreciate and then eventually reject was the fact that they use indoctrination in order to rewrite your brain. You go from being somebody who can't cope to somebody who can, by way of repeated phrases, trauma exposure. You know, you have to go through the steps, and the fourth step was the big one where you have to write down your story, your lists of grievances, who you hurt, your sexual history, everything. And then you have to share it with somebody, and that is as traumatizing. But then once you've shared it with somebody, it's out there, you feel it, you get feedback. And And all the while, you're going through that sort of reorganization of your thoughts. They implant with repetition new thoughts. After a while, I'd see the people who were there for 25, 30, or 40 years. And although I highly respected them and the work they were doing for the newcomers, I'm like, these people are leaning on it almost like it's an addiction still, the actual 12-step process. And once I was done, 5 years in, I realized I needed to let go of that as well so I could move on and be myself and be a person who wasn't the 13th step. That's not what they call the 13th step. That's when you fraternize. So anyway, and that's frowned upon. If you're there, you shouldn't be, oh gosh. Anyway, where was I? Where Kurt Lewin, NTL specialized in brainwash. Oh yeah. Okay. So, but that brainwashing I needed because I had zero coping skills. And yeah, they say 13 steps leads to nowhere. That's a Pantera song, but it's true. And I thought that that was interesting, having that background where I knew of the 13 step song from Pantera whenever they said that and discouraged people from like doing it. I always had that song playing in my head. If you know it, you know it. If not, don't worry about it. All right. For example, the second generation of the Bader Meinhof gang came from the graduates of the Heidelberg Patients Collective, an experimental program using mental patients in which the patients were indoctrinated according to R.D. Laying's Tavistock Schizophrenia Reinforcing Program, and also as part of the program assigned to develop the capability to produce bombs. That seems so far removed from each other. Schizophrenia Reinforcing Program and the capability to produce bombs, all in the same program? Okay, it was the same technique used by Francesca Alberoni, the University of Trento's School of Sociology head, to create Italy's leftist terrorist organization, the Red Brigades. The Trento program was a social work brainwashing program. The same modus operandi was used to create the Weatherman Underground as a terrorist group. Not only was there irrational anarchist indoctrination, largely under the guidance of IPS, but sensitivity sessions, degraded sexual practices, and emphasis on the use of LSD and other drugs were dominant features of the conditioning process. Do you want to know what it was that stepped me out of the AA program? I'm going to tell you. I found out that Bill W. and Dr. Bob developed the 12-step program around LSD treatments because they believed through their scientific process that would make it a permanent recovery. And that makes sense because you're able to rewire your brains with LSD. And I spoke the other day, I don't know if it was chapter 3, I think it was chapter 3, about how I spent some time after my time in AA with all the coping skills that I had, utilizing these plants in ways that I had researched. I had a boxer who had cancer. He had T-cell lymphoma. He had, let me show you this, because he had it erupted out of the side of his face, and my kiddos were small, and they, it was just really hard to witness. He would rub his sore along the walls and there would be streaks of blood and he was just bleeding. I know that this is probably going to be frowned upon by YouTube, but I think you should see it because it wasn't until after this, there's the sore, right? It wasn't until after this that I decided to try it for myself. This was 8 weeks later. and I was making canna butter and putting it on his face, because we were about to put him to sleep. He also, because of where the where the sore was located, he lost it was his facial nerve, so he couldn't blink. He was a boxer, but here he looks like a Great Dane because he had zero muscle capabilities in his face. And it took 3 more months of me maintaining, even though the sore was gone. I kept putting the can of butter on his face, and I kept feeding it to him, and he regenerated that nerve. And it was so incredible to watch. This was when I noticed he had skin regrowth. Like the sore wasn't angry anymore, it wasn't hurting him anymore, but then, um, like I said, it took 8 weeks. My grandmother had pancreatic cancer. Anyway, and it just hurt my feelings that this was something you could try, and not to say it'll help everybody or it works for everybody, and some people have addictive personalities, and you can be addicted to that. You can get addicted. There are people on that My Weird Addiction who are addicted to eating friggin' Bounce, so to say it's not addictive depends on the person. I made it myself. I went and I found, um, which chemicals inhibited tumor growth, and I bought the plant or the flower, that most had those dominant strains, and there was this guide at the dispensary I went to in Denver that showed, um, promotes inhibits cell growth in tumors, and it had THC, CBD, CBG, and, um, THCA or something. And I would go and look for those flowers that contained those dominant chemicals, and I would take a half ounce and 2 cups of coconut oil, and I would slow cook it because what's toxic for dogs, and anytime I tried to go and find CBD or something for dogs, they told me it's toxic, don't give it to them. I'm like, we're gonna put them to sleep anyway, so I'm gonna try it, and I'm gonna hit it heavy. Um, I ended up giving him 90 milligrams a day in his food, plus the stuff I was putting on topically. Anyway, and some of it was I was in a Facebook group, and I'm like, "Look at what's happening." I also had a vet walking with me through this, because she was fascinated, and I'm so grateful for that. Somebody took that story, his story, to Congress, and, I don't know, nothing came from it. But they don't want us healing ourselves, they want us sick and dependent. So, uh, I'm sorry for that sidetrack, but that was what motivated me to try these things. The fact that AA, um, they developed the 12-step program under the, LSD treatments, and they fought their entire lives in the 40s trying to get the 40s and 50s? When did Bill W. die? Anyway, he fought till his death trying to make LSD legal and used as a medicine, as a treatment for addiction, and, didn't make it happen. And that's why I felt like there were so many old timers in the room. And so I stepped out, and I was like, it was a couple years after the fact that I was, willing to try that for myself because I was so worried that I would slip back into old programming. But I didn't, and it seems to have helped. It helped me. So I didn't like microdosing the LSD though because it felt too speedy. I didn't feel healthy using it. So, that's why I did my work with the mushrooms. You're late. Welcome. Sorry, I've been off topic. Yes, olive oil was, actually, it was too expensive for me, I think, so I used the coconut oil. Just because it was topical as well, so I wanted it to be something that would soak in quicker. Um, I don't know why I chose it, but, anyway, it worked for him, and if anybody has a dog, You know, if you have a purebred dog and they get, because I had a previous dog and her paw print is on my arm here. She had mammary tumors and they went up into her spine and it was just the worst. It was the worst, the seizures she would have. Anyway, all right. LSD and other drugs were dominant features of the conditioning process. That's what got me there. So, the rock drug counterculture, including sexually and otherwise degraded communal living conditions, is the general rule among the strata from which terrorists are recruited. I do want to say if you join late, rewind. You can rewind and start from the beginning. You won't miss anything. All right. Yeah. This is the true base for the radical youth idealism of the 1960s, known as the counterculture movement, that spawned the Weathermen and every extreme left-wing organization in the United States. Under the auspices of the Tavistock Institute and the assorted support structure, such as ISP, the indoctrination terrorist program functioned in the following manner. The intake process began with the leftist environmentalist profiling and recruitment under the auspices of Amnesty International. It would last several weeks with drugs and wife swapping, apart from leaderless groups, approaches to deeper political indoctrination. The second principal stage involved a months-long period, augmented with drug use and sexual degradation. The third stage was Longo Mai itself, where would-be terrorists and revolutionaries would receive basic training in weapons. That is happening now. I mean, in Utah, when Charlie was shot, I saw, and people were spreading around these flyers for trans youth militants where they were pictured with AR-15s. Join us now, arm yourself type things. All right. The second principal stage involved a months-long period augmented with drug use and sexual. Oh, yeah. Sorry. The third stage, Longo Mai itself. Sorry. Thus, the environmentalists' communalism of Longo Mai, made famous by the generation of 68, was only a cover for terrorists' basic training conditions and preparation. The next stage is intake into a terrorist group with further training at another camp, anywhere in the Mediterranean region, including Israel. It should be noted that this intake process for screening of potential terrorist recruits is identical with the development of the hardcore of the environmentalist movement. Ian Carroll, do it, Tulsi. See, and I wonder what he said. I just had a notification pop up, but I feel like Tulsi's our only viable asset in the government. I hope you can't hear all that racket outside. The next stage is intake into a terrorist group with further training at another camp anywhere in the Mediterranean region, including Israel. It should be noted that this intake process for screening of potential terrorist recruits is identical with the development of the hardcore of the environmentalist movement. I read that again. The terrorists are distilled from the environmentalists, Maoist movement, or recruited from among prison inmates, largely through either in-person therapy programs or through halfway house programs. And when I got out of rehab, I went straight to a three-quarter house, they call it, the Oxford House. A convict with a pre-established propensity for crimes of violence and a potential psychosis is the most easily deployed, expendable sort of recruit to terrorists and related operations. Neither the terrorist nor the typical terrorist support group in any way corresponds to the myth of the idealists, misled into excesses in one way or another. But apart from the fully conscious controllers among them, are criminalized psychotics or semi-psychotics, either selected because of those pre-existing qualities or because various phases of conditioning bring about these states. Same with like incels and bullied smart kids like Thomas Crooks. And isn't it, I just thought about this, Thomas Crooks's dad was seen at a grocery store with somebody, Thomas Crooks's build, in a beanie with a mask on and sunglasses and gloves. And it seemed very out of place for this person to be covered head to toe, unless it was somebody who was, I don't know, Thomas Crooks. That made me think, maybe that guy didn't die. Anyway, according to the Tavistock profiling of the terrorist, the individual is able to perform functions involving his immediate person and environment. He can function. Where his psychosis shows most clearly is in his ability to cope sanely with abstraction concerning the world in general. In other words, he lives at best with a very small world, a world defined by a very short span of social distance surrounding his or her person. Tavistock controllers then delve deeper, giving a remarkable insight into the control mechanisms of the subject. He functions within a scope of surrogate family, more or less as disturbed but functionally effective 2 to 4 year old might. A functionally effective 2 to 4 year old might. To be exact, an adolescent or adult parody of such a 2 to 4 year old condition. The world outside his or her family is not real. His or her outer world behavior is biased towards the schizophrenic symbol rather than the real. His series of that world of symbols is magical, not cause and effect. He or she carries the infantile superstition of the believer in astrology towards an extreme, which is interesting because J.P. Morgan has been quoted as to saying, if you want, anybody can become a millionaire, but if you want to become a billionaire, you need to consult an astrologist. Now, if a person once agreed that bad people ought to die so they can't hurt good people, and if a person is also dedicated to killing the bad people himself, it suffices, to make the point short, to insert a face, a name, and so forth in place of the symbol of bad, and say, we must kill that bad person. And there you have the gist of it. That's where the controlled media comes into play. The key to aiding the zombie terrorists' deployment into action are certain code phrases. For example, the code phrase used in organizing the Bader-Meinhof Association of Dresden Bank Jürgen Ponto in 1977 was the epithet Nazi communist. How would such a label be used by the controllers to motivate a would-be terrorist to kill his intended target? If one knows the doctrine of Winston Churchill, Hugh Trevor Roper, and John Wheeler Bennett, the doctrine they set forth in defending their preference for Adolf Hitler to the insurgent German generals of 1938 and during the war, one knows that the British not only have a special hatred for German industrialists and the old Catholic Center Party of Germany, but that the British who created Hitler saw fit to accomplish two objectives with one argument: the argument that Nazism was a product of German industry. Although the myth that German industrialism created Hitler in wide circulation, the myth has strong primary emotional significance only in two primary circles: British intelligence circles and a certain section of Zionist circles. And they still use that mantra today. Golly. I don't know how many times I've been called a Nazi, and that's ridiculous. It's just absurd. And it's one of those things, it's the litmus test for indoctrination. Although the myth that Zionist circles as a in Zionist circles, it serves as a reaction formation in respect to Warburg backing of Hjalmar Schacht and of Schacht's placing Hitler in the chancellery, and of various Rothschild, Oppenheimer, and other involvement in the supporting of Hitler before and after 1933 and into 1936 through 38 period. Quote, this emotionally laden identification of German industrialism as being axiomatically Nazism spills over from British intelligence and certain Zionist circles into elements of the Antichrist, environmentalist ultra-left, especially to those layers surrounding and including left terrorist gangs. In these circles, Nazi means essentially German industrialism and is extendable to any pro-industrial, pro-technological progress personality of influence or political current, which is viewed as practically the same thing as a German industrialist. Like Elon? Like Elon? To leave no confusion concerning the significance of Zionism in this case, an interpolated clarification respecting the command structure coordinating international terrorist operations should be made now. The key elements controlling international terrorism include the Fascist International, coordinated by the Eastern European branch of the Maltese Order, the Sovereign Order of the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem. They also include British Roundtable and official intelligence organizations. They also include elements of the Socialist International and elements of international Zionism. Bye, Ricky. Creating the counterculture. The undeclared culture war against America's youth began in earnest in 1967, when Tavistock began using open-air rock concerts to attract over 4 million young people to the so-called festivals. Unbeknownst, the youth became the victims of planned, wide-scale drug experimentation. Hallucinogenic drugs such as dimethyltryptamine, which is DMT. I mean, that's down there, but this is dimethylxiphenylethylamine, STP, phencyclidine, PCP, dextromethorphan, methylene methamine, MDA, or dimethyltryptamine, DMT, and the Beatles-promoted LSD and Blue Microdot LSD 25 are freely distributed at these concerts. I have done DMT 3 times. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. That they are talking about mapping the DMT realm is incredible. Because I seen it, and it was definitely a place. Excuse me. It's been ages. It's not part of my life anymore. I just want to clarify. Oh, I thought you were leaving. You said see ya. Oh, because Craig left? Visitor needs help. Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, the crazy chemical names for real. Because look at how long this one is, MDMA. I'm over here trying to phonetically pronounce. The struggle is real. All right, they were freely distributed at these concerts. Before long, over 50 million of these attendees between the ages of 10 to 25 years old returned home to become the messengers and promoters of the new drug culture, or what came to be called the New Age. So, and people are talking about how the Beatles marks when they started, when they changed the musical hertz from 432 to 440 hertz. And they said that that's what inspired the hysteria. But wouldn't it be interesting if maybe they were all kind of dosed? It just adds a layer. Hallucinogenic drugs are psychomimetic, meaning they mimic certain aspects of psychosis. Through the use of hallucinogenic drugs, one can induce temporary symptoms of psychosis and schizophrenia. Most users of hallucinogenic drugs at the time experienced whole personality changes, causing total alterations of the senses. The intention of the LSD drug scene and the controlled environment it represented wasn't accidental, but completely intentional. This should be required reading to delve into The Chaos Book by Tom O'Neill. If I'd have read this first, either way, I've read them both. Well, halfway through this one. And boy, oh boy, they should be next to each other on the bookshelf always. So the Tavistock Institute had extensively studied the relationship between brain and behavior caused by hallucinogenic drugs. Later on, the knowledge gleaned from the research was channeled into marketing MTV and radio stations through classic oldies songs from 15 to 25 years ago, which are targeted at the adult population. Several Tavistock studies showed that a song or piece of music associated with one's childhood, when heard later in life, could call forth memories and associations of that earlier period. Encoded memories of popular music in the listener were recalled when he or she heard the same piece of music. These memories triggered an emotional drug flashback that set off an infantile emotional state that brought the listener back to that time in which he or she experienced either an identical or one mirroring the drug reaction itself. That pisses me off so bad. I am such a fan of music, and it is like a vehicle for time travel. Ugh, they just have taken everything great and weaponized it. Monterey Pop, the first commercial American rock festival, officially dubbed the first annual Monterey International Pop Festival, was held in June 1967, 2 years before Woodstock, when over 200,000 young people gathered in and around the Monterey County Fairgrounds in Northern California for a 3-day celebration. Monterey Pop 1967 was the general rehearsal for the widespread distribution of a new type of drug, classified as psychedelics or hallucinogens, such as LSD, which were to become prominent and widespread at later outdoor festivals like Woodstock. Author Robert Santelli, in his book Aquarius Rising, writes, LSD was in abundance at Monterey. Tabs of Monterey Purple, an LSD substance also called purple haze, was literally given to anyone wishing to experiment a little. The two characters responsible for the distribution at Monterey Pop were a mystery man from Cocoa Beach, Florida called Peter Goodrich, and the legendary CIA contact agent codename Coyote. One of the organizers of the Monterey Festival was John Phillips, a member of the Mamas and the Papas rock group and former press agent for the Beatles. Phillips was closely linked with Roman Polanski and his wife Sharon Tate, Mama Cass, leader of the Mamas and Papas, and Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, and many other Hollywood celebrities who in turn were linked with Charles Manson's family. Manson's family members stabbed to death the 8 months pregnant actress Sharon Tate on August 9th in 1969 at her home in Los Angeles. So I'm telling you, those books need to be side by side. Sorry. All right. Mama Cass and John Phillips were connected by Manson through the Process Church of the Final Judgment, an offshoot of the Church of Scientology, founded in England in the mid-60s by a couple of former Scientologists. Isn't it interesting that Leah Remini's partner, I forget his name, is dead now? She ended her series. She was like, we'll come back. They never came back. They never came back. Okay. And she had just almost found Kelly Miscavige. Interesting. The Church of Scientology, funded in England in the mid-60s by a couple of former Scientologists, Robert and Mary Ann de Grimston, formed sometime in 63-64. PCFJ was a mixture of reincarnation, existentialism, and an attempt to merge the worships of Jehovah and Lucifer, and a bit of neo-Nazi flavor. It is insignificant that the process's legal work was handled by an elite Wall Street law firm, Morris and McVeigh, whose main backer was the American Family Foundation, who used intelligence-connected mind control experts such as LSD researcher Dr. Luis Jolion West to orchestrate anti-cult hysteria. Dr. West was a major participant in the CIA's MKUltra, which came out of the Tavistock Institute's study of Nazi social control techniques. People with only a passing knowledge of the Manson case usually don't realize that the Beach Boys recorded one of Manson's songs and released it as a B-side of their cover of the old Ursel songs and released it. Nope, sorry. Released it as a B-side of their cover of the old Ursel Hickey 1958 hit Bluebirds Over the Mountain, a song about lost love. The title of the song was suggestive of the CIA mind control operation. Bluebird was a program for exploring the uses of hypnosis and other means to protect the recently created CIA and its personnel from enemy psychic penetration. Bluebird. Is there a reason Manson's song was on the flip side of the Bluebird cover? Had the CIA's Bluebird escaped? Was Manson a Bluebird, i.e. a mind control subject, gone amok? Yes, this came out much before that book was released. And he was on to something. As Peter Levenda explains, I wonder if he wrote about Tavistock in that book. I read it, but it's been some time. As Peter Levenda explains in Sinister Forces, the land of memory was the target of the Bluebird Project. To enter that land in another person's mind, to go through the drawers, rearrange the furniture, and leave unnoticed. Korean War was fought to a stalemate. Vietnam was raging all around us. Africa was ablaze with godless communists holding the upper hand. In America, the year 1968 was a pivotal year in the lives of most people in the generation. It was a time of multiple assassinations, civil unrest, the riots in the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and the election of Richard Nixon as president. For many, it signaled the death of a dream. And it was rebranded the Summer of Love? Or was that BLM? I think that was BLM. But samesies. It was in the same vein. The 60s were known for their free love. It was a rebrand for sure. Anyway, for many, it signaled the death of a dream. For some, the rebirth of a nightmare. It was the year when those things that are now so secret, so classified, and behind the scenes were up front. Oh, so it was the year when those things that are now so secret, so classified, and behind the scenes were up front and in your face. The Cold War, CIA, Prague Spring. It was the year that Frankfurt School, Tavistock Institute, the Institute for Policy Studies, and other like-minded organizations went to war against America. It was the year of Woodstock, the age of Aquarius, and the death of all that we held dear. It wasn't only flowers in their hair that they got. They also got scrambled brains and total dependency on narcotics, a shortened lifespan, a degraded lifestyle which tended to sink lower and lower into the mire. The Age of Aquarius Woodstock Music Festival. Now we're going to get into it. Okay, the largest concert of all time, the open-air Woodstock Music and Art Fair, was what Time magazine labeled an Aquarian festival and history's largest happening. In the process, Woodstock became part of the cultural lexicon. Publicists carefully chose the term Aquarian. According to astronomers, the ages progress in retrograde motion, going in the opposite direction as the sun, which moves from age of Aquarius into the age of Pisces, into the age of Aries, and so forth. If you follow astrological beliefs, the age of Pisces, an artifact of the precession of the equinoxes, is the time span from 200 BC until current day, approximately every 2160 years. The precession of the equinoxes appears to rotate the spring equinox from one constellation to another. We appear to be ending the age of Pisces and beginning the age of Aquarius. Moving into the Aquarian age signifies the age of Pisces, which is the age of Christ, has come to an end. At Woodstock, writes journalist Donald Fow, nearly 500,000 youth gathered to be drugged and brainwashed on a farm. The victims were isolated, immersed in filth, pumped with psychedelic drugs, and kept awake continuously for 3 days straight. And all of the full complicity of the FBI and government officials. Once again, it was the networks of British military intelligence and the CIA who were the initiators. A man credited with Woodstock's creation was Artie Cornfield, the director of Capitol Records, which is owned by EMI. EMI, led by aristocrat Sir Joseph Lockwood, stands for Electrical Music Industries, and unknown to most is one of Britain's largest producers of military electronics and a key member of Britain's military intelligence establishment as a military contractor to the British War Office. Furthermore, EMI's silent partner is another major record label, RCA, which is also active in military space electronics and satellite communications. It is a classic example of what President Dwight Eisenhower would have called the military-industrial complex, but is really the one world government solidifying everything into fewer and fewer hands. I appreciate it. I'm glad to see you. Somebody said they're here just 20 minutes behind, so they won't see me acknowledge this until later. All right. Is that Mary? Hi, Mary. All right. The money for Woodstock was supplied by John Roberts, the heir of the large Pennsylvania-based Block Drugs pharmaceutical empire and toothpaste manufacturing fortune. Joel Rosenman, one of the three partners, writes, as the concert neared, foods and water were clearly going to be in short supply. Sanitary facilities overtaxed, tempers short, drugs overabundant. Worst of all, there was no way for anyone who wanted to leave to leave. According to John Roberts, sitting in your own excrement was part of the original plan. We're going to hand out bananas at the gate to bind our patrons. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, I love it. She's following along. Security of the concert was provided by a hippie commune called the Hog Farm, trained in the mass distribution of LSD. The Hog Farm's connection to drug distribution, however, was well known to concert organizers. John Roberts, Woodstock founder and director, writes, their fee was simply transportation to and from the festival. A peacekeeping force that looked, talked, and smelled like the crowd would be both highly credible and highly effective. Wasn't that the Hells Angels? Most important, they were wise in the ways of drugs, knowing good acid from bad, good trips from bummers, and good medicine from poison, etc. But the famed undercover hippie commune, Hog Farm, was none other than the West Coast psychedelics group called the Merry Pranksters, whose leader was none other than Ken Kesey. The same Kesey who wove his experiences as volunteer in medical experiments into his book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Oh, the experiment begins. Donald Fow, in his book, The Satanic Roots of Rock, describes the event. Quote, 2 days before the scheduled start of the concert, 50,000 kids had already arrived in Woodstock. Drugs immediately began to circulate. Fow, in the same book, continues, for the next 3 days, nearly 500,000 young people that arrived were subjected to continual drugs and rock music. Because of the torrential rains, they were forced to wallow in knee-deep mud. There was no shelter, no way to get out, cars parked over 80 miles away. And there's another typo. Look at that. Come on. Rosenman writes that the key to the Woodstock experiment was keeping our performers performing around the clock to keep the kids transfixed. Gosh, it was so orchestrated. Man, oh man. On August 17th, the New York Times reported, tonight, a festival announcer warned from the stage that badly manufactured acid, a term for LSD, was being circulated. He said, you aren't taking poison acid. That acid's not poison. It's just badly manufactured acid. You're not going to die. So if you think you've taken poison, you haven't. But if you're worried, just take half a tablet. The advice to nearly 500,000 people, just take half a tablet, was given by none other than MK Ultra agent Wavy Gravy. Wavy Gravy, huh? It would be another decade before the counterculture became part of the American lexicon. But the first seeds of what was a giant, the secret project to turn the values of America inside out, were sown. Drugs, sex, rock and roll, massive nationwide demonstrations, hippies, communes, dropout drug heads, the Nixon presidency, the Vietnam War were tearing the fiber of American society apart. The old world and the new collided head on, unbeknownst to the flower children, that it was all part of a secret social and occult agenda, designed by some of the most brilliant and diabolical minds in the world. Hidden away in prestigious foundations, corporations, and think tanks, these political and financial puppeteers ruthlessly and cunningly used pop culture to foster alienation and dysfunction, to achieve arrested development and family breakdown for personal gain. Me, I am in Texas, and I am leaving shortly. All right. The Aquarian Conspiracy. In the spring of 1980, a book exploded on the scene called The Aquarian Conspiracy. Ooh, maybe we should do that next. It sold over 1 million copies and was translated into 10 languages. I actually want to do next The Assault on Truth. I still want to find that. But I'm open to suggestions, so put them in the comments if you want. So overnight, it became a manifesto of the counterculture, defining the counterculture as a cultural group whose values and norms are at odds with those of the social mainstream, and in particular terms as the youth rebellion that swept North America and Western Europe in the 1960s and early 1970s. The Aquarian Conspiracy declared that it is now time for the 15 million Americans involved in the counterculture to join in bringing about a radical change in the United States. In fact, this book was the first mass publication to promote teamwork, a concept hailed as a paragon of virtue and readily promoted by business management gurus. I wonder if you hear the buzz because my phone was propped up on the microphone. I lost it. I saw somebody was staying in the Jim Morrison building. Ricky. Which one? Whatever I forget the name of the hotel he died in. No, that was in France. I meant the one Janis Joplin died in. Something Chalet. Anyway. Okay, in fact, this book was the first mass publication to promote teamwork. Oops. A concept hailed as a paragon of virtue and readily promoted by business management gurus. Teamwork, however, was a psychological technique the Tavistock Institute introduced as a way to control brilliant individuals through peer pressure. It was part of the experiment conducted by Brigadier General and Tavistock Master John Reese in the field of group therapy. L. Marcus, writing for The Campaigner magazine in April of 1974, explains, quote, "A skilled group leader can use the group to create a powerful family environment." I always felt weary of places places of business or bars, because I was a bartender for ages, called themselves a family. I'm like, that means you're toxic. That means you're toxic. That's just how I felt. I'm like, we're not families, we're coworkers. We don't have to. Anyway. Where was I? I'm sorry. A skilled group leader can use the term to create a powerful family environment. Once this environment is induced, it becomes possible for the therapist to manipulate a member of the group, not by a direct attack, but by subtly manipulating through suggestions the other members of the group. Manipulating through suggestions of the other members of the group or through. If the victim has been sucked into thinking of the group as something warm and helpful, then when that environment has been manipulated to turn against him, it will tend to have the impact of deep motherly rejection. Ugh. I worked at a bar and everybody turned against me, but it was almost by design. The owner of the bar was a friend, and she hired me to cover shifts at first, but wouldn't train me to open or close, wouldn't give me the passwords to use the till in that way. And so everybody else who worked there, thought of me as like a dunce. And it never created an environment where I was welcomed, even though everybody needed me there when they didn't want to work. So, and I hated that. I was there for years and they all treated me like I was a freaking, anyway. Okay, it becomes possible. Okay, once this environment is induced, nope. If the victim has been sucked into the thinking of the group of something warm and helpful, then when the environment's been manipulated to turn against him, it will tend to have the impact of the motherly rejection. Right. Furthermore, if the victim is not completely aware of the therapist's chain of manipulation, he will tend to internalize their result, thinking that he himself is responsible for this new awareness about himself. I get it because that's happened to me and I hated it. It made me hate myself. Marcus goes on to say, if the controllers can succeed in structuring a stressed individual's or group's situation appropriately, the victim or victims can be induced to develop for himself a special sort of reaction formation through which he democratically arrives precisely at the attitude and decisions the directors wish to force upon him. So, how did author Marilyn Ferguson see the entire Aquarian movement? Quote, while outlining a not yet titled book about the emerging social alternatives, I thought again about the peculiar form of this movement. It's atypical leadership, the patent intensity of its adherents, their unlikely successes. It suddenly struck me that in their sharing of strategies, their linkage, and their recognition of each other by subtle signals, the participants were not merely cooperating with one another, they were in collusion. This movement is a conspiracy. Oh. In fact, the counterculture revolution was a cleverly concealed conspiracy from the top down, created as a method. No, Mon Chalet or something? Jimi Hendrix stayed there with Janis Joplin. Jimmy Joplin. What am I saying? Sorry, Janis. Love her. Yeah. Same. In fact, Lionel from Lionel Nation posted a picture of Janice from high school or something. And he's like, anybody know who this is? And I was so stoked to see so many people knew. Anyway. In fact, the revolution was In fact, the counterculture revolution was cleverly concealed conspiracy from the top down, created as a method of social control through the use of difficult to identify silent weapons technology, and used to drain the United States of its commitment to scientific and technological progress. Initially, the Aquarian conspiracy was a secret U.S. government project assigned to Stanford Research Institute and credited in 1946 by the Tavistock Institute to study how newly created cultural and social trends affect society, such as libertarianism, left libertarianism, liberalism, socialism, anarchism, communism, materialism, naturism, mysticism, hedonism, spirituality, environmentalism, feminism, New Age, and many other basic orients on society. Never publicly released and secretly named, The Changing Images of Man, the Aquarian Conspiracy sprang from a policy report prepared by the Stanford Research Institute Center for the Study of Social Policy. The 319-page mimeographed report was prepared by a team of 14 researchers and directed by a panel of 23 controllers, including Margaret Mead, B.F. Skinner, Irving Laszlo of the United Nations, Sir Geoffrey Vickers of British Intelligence. The entire project was overseen by Professor Willis Harman, a futurist who specifically was promoting a post-industrial social paradigm as a popular version of how to transform or soften up, according to Tavistock manuals, the United States into Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. In a 1961 lecture, Aldous Huxley had described this police state as the final revolution, a dictatorship without tears, where people love their servitude. He said the goal was to produce a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies so that people will, in fact, have their liberties taken away. Didn't he already talk about this? But will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing, enhanced by pharmacological methods. The aim of the Stanford study, state the authors, is to change the desire of mankind from that of industrial progress to one that embraces spiritualism, war by nonviolent or linear confrontation. The study asserts that in our present society, the image of industrial and technological man is obsolete and must be discarded. Many of our present images appear to have become dangerously obsolete. However, science, technology, and economics have made possible really significant strides towards achieving such basic human goals as physical safety and security, material comfort, and better health. But many of these successes have brought with them problems of being too successful. Problems that seem insoluble within the set of societal value premises that led to their emergence. Our highly developed system of technology leads to higher vulnerability and breakdowns. Indeed, the range and interconnected impact of societal problems that are now emerging pose a serious threat to our civilization. If our predictions of the future prove correct, we can expect the association problems of the trend to become more serious, more universal, and to occur more rapidly. Therefore, the Stanford Research Institute study concludes, we must change the industrial technological image of man fast. Analysis of the nature of contemporary societal problems leads to the conclusion that the images of man that dominated the last 2 centuries will be inadequate for the post-industrial era. The report concludes with the following set of predictions. There are numerous indications that a new anticipatory image of mankind may be emerging. And here's the list. 1, youth involvement in political processes. 2, women's liberation movement. 3, youth rebellion against societal wrongs. 4, emerging interests in social responsibility of business. 5, the generation gap implying a changing paradigm. 6, the anti-technological bias of many young people. 7, experimentation with new family structures and interpersonal relationships. I have such a short attention span. This is the set of predictions. These numerous indications that new anticipatory image of mankind may be emerging. Okay, I don't know if they think that these are hindrances or just what will come. And if so, they seem spot on. 8, the emergence of communes and alternative lifestyles. 9, the emergence of conservative ecology movement. 10, a surge of an interest in Eastern religion and philosophical perspectives. 11, a renewed interest in fundamentalist Christianity. What am I saying? 12, labor union concerns with quality of the work environment. 13, an increasing interest in meditation and other spiritual disciplines. And 14, the increasing importance of self-realization processes. These desperate trends do not, when taken individually, signify the emergence of a new image of human beings, yet when they are considered collectively, they suggest substantial societal stirrings, which may eventually emerge into a new and guiding image. This was published in 1974. In retrospect, How many of these hideous inhuman forms have become accepted by mainstream? Fundamental Christianity, meditation, spirituality, is that hideous? Great reading. I feel like I'm doing the worst. I'm stumbling and stuttering and stammering. I already read Chaos. Maybe I will. If you guys want me to, I will. I know that Mary's behind. Excellent. I love that. She said, Amanda, I was born in 1965, so this is very curious. Wow, you guys are being sweet to each other. Good morning. That's okay. I'm glad that it's here for you to go back and catch up. The authors of the great books. Yes. This author, like the Bilderberg Group book. Okay. It was hideous, right? New and guiding image was published. Okay. The softened up. No. I'm sorry. Hideous inhuman forms become accepted by mainstream. Each and every one of them, investigative journalist Crichton Zokas called it countercultural zombieism. Interesting. Thus softened up, the United States was now deemed ripe for the introduction of drugs, especially crack cocaine, and heroin. And that was in the 80s. So that study or that list was published in 74, the study and the list conclusion. And then they're talking about this introduction in the 80s to rival the Prohibition era in scope and the huge amounts of money to be made. This too was an integral part of the Aquarian conspiracy. The proliferation of drug usage was one of the subjects under study at the Science Policy Research Unit, SPRU, at the Tavistock Institute's Sussex University facility. It was known as the Future Shocks Center, a title given to so-called future-oriented psychology designed to manipulate whole populations, groups to induce future shocks. Shock agents, remember that term? Okay. A title so given, The Columbus Center at the University of Sussex is a Tavistock Front organization. The center is involved only in one line of work. It publishes studies in the dynamics of persecution and extermination. In other words, the United States were to be programmed to change and become so accustomed to such planned changes that it would hardly be noticeable when profound changes did occur. In fact, this far-reaching initiative for silent weapon technology was first discussed and put into action as an artificial doctrine by the Policy Committee of the Bilderberg Group at their inaugural meeting in 1954. They used the term Quiet War, World War III, to describe the overt tactical methodology to subjugate the human race. The document titled Top Secret, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, an Introductory Programming Manual, was uncovered quite by accident on July 7th, 1986, when an employee of the Boeing Aircraft Company purchased a surplus IBM copier for scrap parts at a sale and discovered inside details of a plan hatched in the embryonic days of the Cold War. This manual of strategies called for control of the masses through manipulation and of industry, people's pastimes, educational and political leanings. Gosh, can you imagine stumbling on something like that? You buy an old printer? Oh my God. It called for a quiet revolution, pitting brother against brother to divert the public's attention from what's really going on. Wow. Here's a partial quote from this document, and it has the document number, parentheses, TM-SW 7905.1. If I had an encoder, we'd be pulling that up right now. It is potentially impossible to discuss social engineering or the automation of society, i.e., the engineering of social automation systems or silent weapons, on a national or worldwide scale without implying extensive objectives of social control and destruction of human life, i.e., slavery and genocide. This manual is in itself an analog declaration of intent. Such writing must be secured from public scrutiny. Otherwise, it might be recognized as a technically formal declaration of domestic war. Furthermore, whenever any person or group of persons in a position of great power and without full knowledge and consent of the public uses such knowledge and methodology for economic conquest, it must be understood that a state of domestic warfare exists between said person or groups of persons in the public. The solution of today's problems requires an approach which is ruthlessly candid, with no agonizing over religious, moral, or cultural values. You must have you have qualified for this project because of your ability to look at human society with cold objectivity, and yet analyze and discuss your observations and conclusions with others of similar intellectual capacity without a loss of discretion or humility. Such virtues are exercised in your own best interest. Do not deviate from them. Look at my elbow. Can you see the knot? Oh, you can't see them, but I'm leaning on the edge of a table and it's making a ladder. Anyway, sorry to pull from such a serious excerpt. On a side note, substantial chunks of the 3,000 pages of recommendations given to the newly elected Ronald Reagan administration in January 1981 were based upon material taken from Willis Harman's Changing Images of Man. And I was born during the Reagan administration, where he deemed ketchup was a fruit or a vegetable coming from a fruit-based substance. Anyway, remember that. So, in school lunches, he made ketchup, qualifying as a vegetable. So, during the full moon on December 8th, 1980, John Lennon was killed by a man named Mark Chapman, a man who prayed to Satan hours before he pulled the trigger, who walked robotically through the motions of murder in a trance-like daze and found himself in police custody, staring bewilderedly out at the world within a tiny closet of darkened dreams. A carefully constructed multiple personality with a tightly focused purpose, a single target, and ultimate deniability, who stood and waited for police to arrive, calmly reading The Catcher in the Rye, that coming-of-age novel by former U.S. Army intelligence officer J.D. Salinger. It is doubtful we shall ever learn what Mark Chapman was definitively the victim of an artificially induced model psychosis, Manchurian candidate, type assassin, deployed by the combined Tavistock, CIA, MI6 to silence the increasingly unmanageable Lennon. In the end, it is the dreamers who die by an assassin's hand. Quite often, they are killed by men who themselves are dreamers. 8 months later, on August 1st, 1981, a new concept was created in television that was part of the Tavistock Institute-led Quiet War for Silent Weapons Technology. It was a 24-hour per day music station called MTV. Oh, this hurts my feelings. Music television. Popular fairy tales aside, MTV2 was created by the controllers of the world's leading think tanks and brainwashing institutes for the purpose of further destroying the youth culture and permanently implanting another generational shift in modern society. It is still operating right now. The most good. Thank you. I'm just glad you guys are willing to sit and listen with me. Oh, yeah. Woodstock, Hollywood, Tavistock. Excellent thought process. Interesting. Interesting. Man, I'm going to have to sit and digest that. Wow, man, MTV raised me. I remember sitting in my jammies. Oh, and I think back at some of the music that is now playing in, like, department stores and Walmart and stuff, like, En Vogue, and I see a lot of people sharing memes, like, "This is what I looked like when I was belting alongside En Vogue, singing about what they sang about, or that eeny, meeny, teeny, weeny, shriveled little" Whoa, us children were singing along to that freaking song. No idea. I had a birthday party for my kiddo the other day where we rented out a theater and, showed to his group of friends and parents The Goonies, and all us parents, we were so excited, but the amount of cringing we were throwing at each other while watching this movie with our kids because of the S word and the drug references and, um, the kissing. One of the older kids kissed the younger kid, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what did I do?" And I'm in small town Texas, like, alienating myself further from the moms that did wanna hang out with me. Um, but I told them what we were watching, we were all stoked, but you didn't think about contextually the humor from the '80s as a current mom until your kids are watching it with you. Anyway, thank you for being here with me. We've been on for an hour and a half. I love you guys. So honestly and genuinely, thank you for participating, for being here always, and come back tomorrow. Is today Thursday? It is. So Candace is back. No, today's Friday, all friggin' day. So I'll see you Monday. Um, God bless you. Christ is King, and we'll connect again Monday. Thanks for being here. Bye, guys.